Ethan Ward sat alone in his art studio. The night outside was silent. Only the soft sound of rain tapping against the tall windows could be heard. The warm glow of a single desk lamp lit up the unfinished marble statue in front of him. He ran, his fingers over the cool stone, shaping the delicate curve of a face that seemed almost alive. For Ethan, sculpting was not just a job, it was his entire world. Every piece he made told a story, and tonight's work was supposed to be his best yet. But that was before the light came. It started as a faint shimmer in the corner of the room. Like heat waves over a desert road, Ethan stopped his work and stared. Thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him, the shimmer grew brighter, turning into a beam of deep blue light that seemed to hum softly. The air felt heavier, charged with strange energy. His heart began to race. The beam widened and a shape began to form inside it. It was tall, slender, and moving towards him when the light faded. A woman stood in the middle of his studio. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was smooth and pale with a faint silver sheen, as if it had been brushed with starlight. Her hair, long and flowing, shimmered between shades of violet and deep blue. Her eyes were the most striking, glowing with a soft golden light. Ethan stumbled back, nearly knocking over his stool. Who are you?" he managed to ask. The woman looked around the studio, her gaze studying every sculpture as if she were reading their stories. Then she turned to him and spoke in a voice that was calm yet carried an otherworldly echo. "My name is Leora, and I have traveled across galaxies to find you." Ethan blinked, thinking this had to be a dream or a hallucination. "Galaxies?" he repeated. She nodded, walking closer, her steps making no sound on the wooden floor. "You are Ethan Ward, the human sculptor," she said. "Your works have reached even the Andran Empire." Ethan gave a small, nervous laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about. The what empire?" Leora ignored the question, her golden eyes locking with his. "I have a request for you, Ethan Ward," she said slowly. "A sculpture unlike anything you have ever made." Her words sent a chill through him. There was something about her tone, part command, part plea. "What kind of sculpture?" he asked cautiously. She hesitated, studying him as if weighing his soul. "I cannot tell you." "Not yet," she replied. "You must agree first." Ethan frowned. "You expect me to agree without knowing what it is?" "Yes," she said, simply, "because if I tell you now, you will refuse." A long silence filled the room, broken only by the rain outside. Ethan crossed his arms. "Lady, this is insane. I don't even know if you're real." Leora's expression softened. "I am as real as your art," she said. "And my request will test everything you are, your skill, your courage, your very will to live." The way she said those last words made his stomach tighten. Something dangerous was hidden behind her calm appearance. "And what do I get if I say yes?" he asked, half joking but also curious. Her golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Knowledge," she said. "Power. Things your world cannot even dream of." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. For a moment, he imagined what she meant. Technology beyond human science, secrets from other worlds. Perhaps even the ability to create art that would last forever. But then the other side of his mind spoke, the part that kept him alive. She was dangerous, her request was dangerous, and agreeing could be a mistake he would never walk away from. "I don't know," he muttered. Leora stepped even closer, so close he could see tiny constellations in her eyes. "Ethan Ward," she said softly, "some challenges come to us only once in a lifetime. This is yours." For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Ethan felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. Something told him that if he refused, his life would go on as it always had, safe, predictable, and ordinary. But if he agreed, nothing would ever be the same again. The rain outside grew heavier, the sound filling the room like a drumbeat. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the sculpting tool still in his hand. Finally, he said the words that would change everything. "All right. I'll do it. Leora's lips curved into a faint smile. You will not regret this, she said, though there was a shadow in her voice that made him wonder if she truly believed that. She reached into the air, her hand vanishing into a shimmer of light, and when she pulled it back, a small silver sphere rested in her palm. This will take us where we need to go, she explained, but once we leave, there's no turning back. Ethan glanced at the sphere, then at the strange woman who had just stepped into his life out of nowhere. He didn't know what waited for him beyond that blue light, but something deep inside whispered that whatever it would be the most daring challenge he had ever faced. And so, as the silver sphere began to glow, Ethan stepped forward into the unknown. The world outside the glowing sphere vanished in an instant. Ethan felt as if his entire body had been pulled through a tunnel made of light and sound, colors twisted around him, blues, purples, and golds, moving like waves on an endless ocean. For a moment, he thought he was falling. Then his feet touched solid ground again when his vision cleared. Ethan found himself standing inside a vast room unlike anything on Earth. The walls shimmered with a faint silver glow, and strange patterns moved across them like living art. The air smelled faintly sweet, like flowers he had never known. Above him, the ceiling curved into a transparent dome, showing a night sky filled with stars. But they were not his stars. He could see planets drifting in the distance, some glowing, some ringed with shimmering dust. This, Leora said, stepping forward, is my ship. Her voice echoed slightly, as if the walls themselves were listening. Ethan turned slowly, taking it all in. This is impossible, he whispered. A faint smile touched her lips. Much of what you will see from now on will feel that way. She led him through a long, curved hallway. Ethan noticed doors made of pure light, and symbols carved into the walls. That seemed to shift when he looked directly at them. At the end of the hallway, a large circular chamber opened before them. In the center was a table made of black glass, and above it floated a rotating image, a massive alien face. Majestic and terrifying, Ethan stopped in his tracks. The face was unlike anything human, long, elegant features, skin like liquid silver, eyes like deep wells of light. There was something in that gaze that made his chest tighten, even though it wasn't real. What is that? He asked quietly. Leora stepped beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the floating image. That, she said softly, is the God of my people? Ethan's heart skipped a beat. God? You mean like a myth? She shook her head. No. A living being. He stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. You want me to sculpt a god? He asked, half in disbelief. Her answer was simple. Yes, Ethan laughed nervously. You can't be serious. Her voice grew colder. I am. She turned to face him. In my world, sculpting the face of the god is forbidden, punishable by death. Ethan froze. Then why? Because only an outsider can do it. She interrupted. Only someone not bound by our laws. Someone who can see with fresh eyes. He shook his head. And you think I'm that person? I know you are, she said firmly. Your art, it carries truth. Ethan felt his mouth go dry. If your people find out, they'll kill me. Leora didn't look away. If you succeed, they will worship your work for centuries. Her words hung in the air like a dangerous promise. And if I refuse? He asked. Her expression softened, but there was a sadness there. Then my journey here will have been for nothing, and a chance to change history will vanish. He stared again at the god's face, at the perfect yet alien lines. Every part of him knew this was a bad idea, but deep down, a different voice whispered, this is your chance to make something eternal. What's in it for me? He finally asked. Leora stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. Knowledge, Ethan. I will give you access to alien tools, materials beyond your imagination, and truths about the universe no human has ever known. She held his gaze. And if you wish, I can show you how to make your art immortal. Ethan felt a shiver run through him. The studio back on Earth suddenly seemed very small, very ordinary. Here was a challenge no human had ever faced, a danger no artist had dared to accept, and for some reason, he found himself wanting to say yes, but before he could answer, Leora spoke again, her voice now sharp and urgent. "There's one thing you must understand. To sculpt the god's face, you must see it in person." Ethan frowned. "Where is it?" Her golden eyes darkened. "Far from here, on a world guarded by priests who would kill us both if they knew why we came." A heavy silence fell between them. Ethan could feel the weight of the choice pressing on him again. Safe life or dangerous legend. The path was opening before him. And as he looked at the floating face once more, he knew that if he said yes, there would be no turning back. Ethan sat in the co-pilot seat of Leora's ship. Before him stretched an endless sea of stars, brighter and closer than he had ever imagined. The ship moved silently through space, gliding faster than his mind could comprehend. Outside the curved glass, planets drifted by like glowing marbles, their colors painting the darkness with blues, reds, and golds. "This is unreal," Ethan muttered, leaning forward. Leora, seated at the controls, didn't look at him. Her eyes focused on a glowing path of light that floated in the void ahead. "It will feel even more unreal when we reach the world of the god," she said quietly. "But do not mistake beauty for safety." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She glanced at him. "The path to the temple is dangerous." Her words carried a weight that made his stomach tighten. The ship passed through a swirling band of silver dust. It clung to the glass, glowing faintly, and Ethan felt the hair on his arms rise. "What is that?" he asked. "Drift storm residue," she replied. "Harmless now, deadly if it were alive." Before he could ask what that meant, the lights inside the ship dimmed. Leora pressed a sequence of symbols on the control panel, and a transparent shield of shimmering energy formed around them. "We are entering the border," she said. A moment later, Ethan saw them, shapes moving in the dark. They were huge, like floating ribbons of shadow, each with dozens of glowing eyes. "They sense us," Leora whispered. "Do not make sudden movements, Ethan. Grip the armrests. They're outside the ship. They can't get in, right?" Her silence was not comforting. One of the creatures glided past the glass, its eyes studying him. It was beautiful in a strange way, but something about its slow, deliberate movement told him it was a predator. Leora guided the ship carefully between them. "They feed on fear," she murmured. "If you panic, they will try to enter your mind." Ethan forced himself to look away, focusing instead on the glowing path ahead. After what felt like hours, the creatures faded into the distance. Only then did Leora release a slow breath. "You handled it well," she said. "Many would have broken." They continued for hours, or maybe days. Ethan couldn't tell. Time seemed to blur in the endless dark. Finally, the blackness broke, revealing a sight that stole his breath. A massive planet floated before them. Its surface was a swirl of glowing forests and silver rivers. Storms of soft blue lightning danced in the upper clouds. And in the center of it all was a single towering structure that reached from the ground to the edge of the atmosphere. Even from space, Ethan could see it was not natural. The temple. "That's it," Leora said softly, her eyes fixed on the towering spire. "The god waits there." As they descended, Ethan saw more of the world. Forests where the leaves glowed like fireflies, rivers that reflected the stars, even in daylight, mountains made of crystal that caught the sunlight and scattered it in 1,000 colors, but the beauty was shadowed by movement. Guards in dark silver armor patrolled the temple grounds. Ships circled above like hawks. "They're not expecting visitors," Ethan said under his breath. "They never expect outsiders," Leora replied. "Which is why we must be careful." The ship landed in a hidden clearing, far from the main city. Ethan followed Leora out into the alien air. It was warm, thick, and carried a scent like rain mixed with metal. Insects with glassy wings hovered silently around glowing flowers. From somewhere far away, A deep, rhythmic sound echoed. Like a heartbeat in the earth. What is that sound? Ethan asked. The god's breath, Leora said simply. She handed him a small silver mask. You will need this when we enter the temple. He turned it over in his hands. Why? It will hide you from their mind scanners, she explained. Without it, they will know your thoughts and kill you before you take another step. Ethan slipped the mask over his face, feeling the strange hum of its energy. Every instinct told him he was walking into danger, but another voice inside whispered that this was the beginning of something far greater than himself. Leora started walking toward the glowing city in the distance. Ethan followed, each step taking him deeper into a world where one wrong move could end everything. And above it all, the temple waited, a silent giant holding secrets older than humanity itself. The temple rose before them like a mountain carved from silver and shadow. Its walls shimmered faintly, as if alive, breathing in the sunlight and exhaling pale light back into the air. Ethan craned his neck to see the top, but the spire vanished into the clouds. Every step toward it made him feel smaller, not just in size but in spirit. Leora led him through a narrow canyon path guarded by towering statues. They were unlike any sculpture Ethan had ever seen. Each figure was perfect, but their faces were hidden behind masks of smooth metal. Why are their faces covered? He whispered. To look upon the god's likeness without permission is death. Leora replied, even for stone. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange hum that Ethan felt more than heard. It was deep, steady, and seemed to resonate in his bones. He realized it was the same sound he had heard in the forest, the god's breath. It made his chest tighten, as though some unseen presence was already watching him. At the base of the temple, massive gates of black crystal blocked their way. Priests in flowing silver robes stood guard, their eyes hidden behind thin strips of glowing glass. Leora handed one of them a small silver token, and without a word, the gates began to open. The sound was like distant thunder. Slow and deep inside, the temple was even stranger. The walls pulsed with faint light, like veins carrying energy. Strips of gold liquid ran across the floor in patterns Ethan didn't understand. Everywhere he looked, alien symbols shifted, rearranged themselves. The air was warm, but carried a faint taste of metal. They walked for what felt like an eternity through winding halls. Ethan could feel the tension building in Leora's movements. Finally, they entered a vast circular chamber, its ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. In the center stood an enormous pool of liquid silver, perfectly still. At its far edge, a shape stirred beneath the surface. Ethan froze. The liquid rippled, and then something began to rise. First came the crown, a ring of jagged crystal that glowed with a light so bright it hurt to look at. Then the head emerged, massive and alien, skin like polished silver, eyes opened, not glowing, not burning, but deep and endless, like windows into the birth of stars. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The being looked at him, and in that instant, the world seemed to fall away. His mind was filled with visions, cities rising and crumbling in seconds, oceans boiling under alien suns, stars exploding into colors he didn't have names for. He saw himself standing in places he had never been, sculpting with hands that moved faster than thought, and through it all, he felt the god's voice. Though no words were spoken, when the visions ended, Ethan was shaking. The god tilted its head slightly, as if studying a fragile thing. Then, in a voice that felt like it came from inside his own bones, it spoke, "If you carve my face, you will carve your own fate." The words echoed in his skull long after the sound faded. Ethan didn't know if it was a warning or a challenge, but in that moment, standing before a living god, he knew that whatever this was, it was far greater than Leora had told him. God sank back beneath the silver pool, leaving only ripples that slowly stilled. Leora placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, her touch grounding him back to reality. "You have seen it," she said quietly. "Now the real work begins." Ethan turned to her. still trying to breathe normally, but deep inside, he knew that. The image of that face was now burned into his soul, and no matter what happened next, he would never be able to forget it. The room Liara led him to was unlike any studio Ethan had ever worked in. It was round, its walls lined with floating shelves, each holding blocks of strange materials. Glowing crystal, metal that pulsed like a heartbeat, stone so black it seemed to swallow light. In the center stood a sculpting platform, smooth and silver, with tools floating in the air around it. They rotated slowly, each shaped for a purpose Ethan couldn't yet imagine. "This is your workspace," Liara said. "Stepping aside, you will have everything you need here. And more." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes drawn to a block of pale stone on the platform. It shimmered faintly, and when he reached out to touch it, the surface was warm, almost alive. "What is this?" he asked. "Celestine," she replied. "It remembers every touch, and it cannot be broken once finished." He swallowed hard. "So, no mistakes." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Not if you value your life." The tools themselves were unlike anything he had ever held. One was a blade of pure light that hummed softly. Another was a needle-thin rod that seemed to cut without touching. When he picked them up, they adjusted in size and weight to fit his hands perfectly. As if they knew him, Ethan began to work. At first, he tried to think of it like his normal sculptures, smooth the edges to find the lines, shape the contours. But the moment he started, he felt something strange. His hands moved faster than his mind, as if an invisible guide was showing him where to cut. Every stroke revealed details he hadn't planned, yet somehow felt right. Time lost meaning. Hours or days could have passed. The god's face began to emerge, not from his memory, but from somewhere deeper. Every curve, every angle seemed to hold power. Sometimes the Celestine would resist, almost as if it didn't want to take the shape. Other times it seemed to welcome his touch, almost shaping itself. Liara stood silently nearby, watching with an intensity that made him uneasy. Once, he caught her whispering something in a language he didn't know, her golden eyes never leaving the sculpture. Then the visions began, with each cut. Ethan saw flashes, alien landscapes, battles under 3 moons. A planet of glass shattered into space. He felt the god's gaze again, pressing into his mind. His heart pounded, but his hands never stopped. By the time he stepped back, the face was nearly complete, even unfinished. It felt alive. The air around it seemed heavier, and faint ripples of light moved across its surface. Ethan realized his breathing was ragged, his hands trembling. He felt both exhausted and changed. Liara stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something sacred. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Too beautiful. It will draw them to us." Before Ethan could ask who she meant, an alarm pulsed through the walls, a deep, rhythmic sound that shook the room. Liara's expression hardened instantly. "They know," she said. "The priests have sensed it." Outside, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. Ethan glanced at the unfinished sculpture. "I'm not done." "You will finish," she said sharply. "But now, we must survive." She moved to the door, activating a shimmering barrier of light. Ethan turned back to the god's face, his tools still floating before him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew that the final stroke would change everything. For him, for Liara, maybe even for this entire world. And as the sound of approaching voices grew louder, he picked up the blade of light again. Because no matter what was coming through that door, he had to finish. The pounding at the door grew louder. Each strike echoed through the walls like the heartbeat of a giant. Ethan's hands shook, but his grip on the blade of light did not loosen. The god's face stood before him, unfinished, the final details hovering just beyond his reach. "Liara," he began, but she was already moving, her body shifting with a fluid grace as she drew a weapon from her belt. It wasn't a blade or a gun. It was a staff of glowing metal, humming with a dangerous energy. "When the door falls," she said without looking at him, "do not stop." The barrier at the entrance flared bright, Through the shimmering wall of light, Ethan could see the priests, their silver robes flowing, their masked faces fixed on him like predators. They chanted in unison, their voices low and heavy, each word vibrating in his bones. Leora planted herself between Ethan and the door, her stance wide, her eyes blazing gold. The barrier shattered. The priest surged in like a wave of silver and shadow. Leora moved, her staff spinning, arcs of light cracking through the air with each strike. The sound was sharp, violent, almost alive. One priest tried to push past her, but she struck the floor, sending a shockwave that threw him back. Ethan turned away from the chaos, forcing his focus back to the sculpture. His breath came fast, every muscle in his arms burning as he carved. The last curves of the god's cheek, the Celestine pulsed under his touch, as if the stone itself knew the end was near. The room shook with impacts. Leora grunted in pain but did not fall. A flash of silver light passed dangerously close to Ethan's head, a weapon strike meant for him, deflected at the last second by Leora's staff. "Finish it," she shouted, her voice raw. Ethan's blade of light cut the final line. The instant it touched the stone, the sculpture erupted in a wave of brilliance. The air grew impossibly heavy, and the sound of the priest's chants faltered. From the glowing stone, a voice spoke, not in words, but in a feeling that filled every corner of the room. The god was here. The walls themselves seemed to ripple. The light bending, the priests dropped to their knees, their masked faces tilted toward the sculpture in fear or worship. Ethan couldn't tell. Leora stood frozen, her staff lowered, her golden eyes wide in awe, the god's presence wrapped around Ethan. He felt his mind being pulled somewhere beyond the room, beyond the planet. Visions poured into him, entire star systems, ancient wars, the birth and death of civilizations. It was too much, yet he could not turn away. When it ended, he was on his knees, gasping for air. The sculpture still glowed faintly, but now the god's face looked alive. Its eyes followed him, not like a carving, but like a being staring from the other side of the stone. The priests spoke again, their voices shaking. One pointed at Ethan. "The outsider has been chosen." Leora stepped to his side, pulling him to his feet. "Chosen for what?" Ethan whispered. Her expression was unreadable. "For a gift," she said, "and for a cost you may not be ready to pay." The god's presence lingered, heavy and impossible to ignore. Ethan knew in his bones that whatever came next, his life would never belong to him. The chamber was silent, except for the faint hum of the glowing sculpture. The priests remained kneeling, their masked faces lowered to the ground. Ethan stood in the center, still trying to catch his breath. Leora stayed close, her staff lowered, but ready, her golden eyes locked on the statue as if it might move. Then the air shifted. It was not wind, but a pressure, a presence pressing against his skin, his bones, his thoughts. The god's voice came again, not through sound, but directly inside his mind. "You have given me shape in this world. Now I give you shape in yours." Ethan felt something stir deep inside his chest. Warm at first, then almost burning. Images flashed before his eyes, his hands touching raw stone, and with a single thought, it transformed into a finished masterpiece. Wood, metal, glass, clay, all obeying his imagination instantly. He could create anything, anywhere, without tools, without time, without limits. But then the warmth turned cold. A shadow passed through him, and he saw the price, each creation, pulling a thread from his life. Every work of art he made would take days, months, maybe even years from his own time. He saw visions of himself older, weaker, drained by the beauty he brought into existence. Ethan's knees weakened. He understood now. This was no simple gift. It was a power that could make him a legend, or destroy him. Leora's voice broke through the heavy silence. "What has it given you?" she asked. Ethan turned to her slowly. "The ability to make anything I imagine. But it will cost me my life, piece by piece." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped closer, her voice low, urgent. With that power, you could change worlds. Or you could stay hidden, creating only when you must. Ethan looked at the glowing face of the god one last time. The weight of the choice pressed hard against him, to use this gift and burn brightly for a short time, or live quietly and let the gift fade. Behind him, the priests began chanting again, their voices soft now, reverent. Leora extended her hand to him, her golden eyes steady. "Come with me," she said. "There are worlds that will pay any price for the wonders you can make, and some that will kill to stop you." Ethan glanced once toward the imagined safety of Earth. It felt far away now, small, ordinary. And then he looked at the stars through the temple's high arch. They seemed alive, waiting, daring him to take the first step. His hand closed around hers. The choice was made. The temple doors opened, spilling starlight into the chamber, and Ethan Ward, sculptor, outsider, chosen, stepped forward into a future where every creation would shape not just stone, but destiny itself.